Hello again, this is Stephanie. This is week 7. What would I call this moment? Introspective learning moment? I don't know. I don't have a name for this kind of video yet. I'm doing much shorter updates for my language learning, and so I wanted to do kind of a micro video right now before I go out to dinner. I just got back from work, and I wanted to show you the view from my hotel room. I don't know if you can see the giant pit out there, but the construction boom in China is super real. I'm in a very touristy part of Qingdao right now, not far from the waterfront, where a lot of the tourist activity happens and some other things, and where the Tsingtao brewery is and all that kind of stuff. So we're not far from there, and yet there is tons of construction still going on. It's almost impossible to be anywhere in China right now and not be near construction. Not the point of this video, but it is a part of the language and the culture and where I am, and it's part of what I'm learning to read about eventually, because part of my big goals is to be able to read newspapers eventually. And what I'd be reading, part of what I'd be reading about is what's going on in the country that I'm living in, which is in China. Okay, so the moment, I have a little note today from when I was at work, and I thought of something and thought, oh my gosh, I have to share this. So I'm not learning Chinese conventionally, as I've mentioned before. Classrooms haven't worked for me. Learning pronunciation and speaking first, especially speaking whole giant chunks of the language because of the tones, hasn't worked for me. And I'm a very visual learner, and I find that I need a visual to hang a sound on. And so I'm learning reading first, and I'm learning the characters essentially for about 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 months. I'll just be learning individual characters. They may combine together to mean other things, and I may accidentally be able to read whole sentences. And I am going to learn the pinyin of them. Oh, hold on. Sorry. I don't have my stand with me, and my arm's getting tired, so I'm getting super lazy. Anyway, I don't have, I am going to learn the pinyin, I've decided, which includes the sound of the language, because I need some way to express the character I'm talking about instead of my silly names for them. So that is a change from my beginning plan of just learning the interpretation or the meaning of the characters, because I find that I want to discuss the characters and the meanings and the differences and all that kind of stuff with the people I'm finding online and in person, to be quite honest with you. I want to talk about the written language, and I need the names of them and the pinyin and the sounds in order to do that. So that is a slight switch, but I'm not approaching it through speaking the language, which is, I think, pretty different than what most folks are doing, and it's definitely different from what most folks are doing in classrooms and in private lessons. And I had a very interesting discussion today with a super nice coworker, but it really reinstilled with me my motivations. And it's not so much the discussion with him, because he was much more of the you have to learn the sounds to get to the meaning. And maybe it's my creative brain, but I've been able to pretty, not easily, but more easily attach the meaning to a character without knowing the pinyin, which includes the sound in Mandarin, than just hearing the sound and not seeing the visual of the character. So for me, this is much easier of a gateway into the language than going through the sounds of speaking it. So, and there was a bit of a resistance, because I think it's much more common to learn the speaking first and then to learn the writing. And I've tried that before, and it just hasn't worked for me. And I think language learning is an intensely personal thing, and I'm really beginning to wonder how any of my students have learned in any of their classes. If you are one of my ex-students, please tell me, did you learn anything in these group classes? Not just in mine, but in any group classes, not just my students. But holy cow, how do we learn in group classes when language learning is so intensely personal? Anyway, that's not my point. My point is I found myself defending the way that I'm learning the language now, which I'm getting much farther meaning-wise in the language than I ever have in such a short period of time. It's week 7, and I can actually recognize meaning around me and in random signs and on some websites, although I'm trying not to overwhelm myself with that, and some magazines, although I don't want to spend a lot of time on them. Anyway, I gotta get down to dinner, but I wanted to say this. I found myself saying the phrase return on motivation, and I don't know if this is, I think I'm thinking of like return on investment in business terms. And the way I mean it is maybe it's a new phrase, maybe I thought I heard it somewhere else, but I'm thinking as far as language learning in Chinese for me, I have a much higher return on motivation working through the characters first and then attaching a sound, but mostly dealing with the meaning. The sound for me is there so I can talk about the characters and the meaning and play with the different characters because they're kind of fun when they're not frustrating. So that's the purpose of the sound for me. But the entry into the language with me and the success that motivates me is coming from the characters and the look of the characters and the meaning behind the characters. It didn't come from the sounds for me. It just didn't. Either time that I tried to learn it, it didn't. So the return on motivation for me, going through the characters first and the visualization of the language is working so much better, even just 7 weeks in. I may plateau. I may find that the sounds become fun at some point. Who knows? But right now, my return on motivation, and I think this should be a term, for those of you that are learning the language through this route, through the visual way, primarily with sound as an undercurrent, maybe this should be a thing. Should this be a thing? This is my thing. You're welcome to take it as yours. This isn't meant to be a teaching video. This is meant to be an explanation of how I'm learning the language video, and hopefully a year back from now I'll look back at this and go, hey, it worked. I can do this, this, and this, whereas last year I couldn't. Okay, so the return on motivation for me, I kept saying this phrase, and I'm like, where does this phrase come from? It's because so much of my language teaching and in my graduate degree, studying how languages are taught and learned, a lot of people were grasping for the way to learn languages, and there isn't one way to learn languages. It's there's different methodologies you can use, and most of the time the most effective ones I've learned are doing different things at different times. And sometimes some things stick and sometimes they don't. And some things stick more with some people and some don't. And I'm guessing the characters and the visualization of them sticks for me. It might not for you. But I thought this was really interesting that I've finally just gone, I've never been a fan of the way, but I'm really, really not a fan of having a conversation with folks who really think there's only one way to learn any language. Any language. I don't care if it's English, Chinese, or anything. I think there's a variety of different ways, and you've got to do what works for you. So, and this is what's working for me so far. When it doesn't, I'll switch, because that's the beauty of language learning, is that you can do whatever works for you as long as you need to. So return on motivation. That's what I'm going to name this video. Maybe it's an aha moment. Maybe that's kind of what I will name this kind of video, is kind of language learning clarity aha moment. I don't know. I'll think about it while it uploads. But I just wanted to share that with you. This is return on motivation. I get a lot more confidence and motivation to learn the language with the characters and their meaning than I do on trying to communicate in a language with the tones that really, really have a high failure rate for me. I'm really not good at it. So I find it's much more motivating to work on the characters and their meaning with the pronunciation as an undercurrent than to work on just speaking and communication. And I know plenty of people who learn Chinese speaking and then later go back and do reading and writing, mostly reading, not a lot of writing. And that worked for them. And again, do what works for you, and do what return on motivation works for you. But I want to put this out there, one, as a defense that this is not the wrong way to do it, because it's working right now. And as long as it works, it's right, because this is all about meaning. And the second reason, if there's anybody else doing that, or anybody else that has hit a wall with Chinese and you're wondering, you want to try again, but you're not sure what to do, join me in this quest, going through the characters first, and then going on to speaking later. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go. Thank you for coming along for the ride. I think aha moment is what I'm going to label these. I think I've decided that. I am now late for dinner, so I'm going to go. Bye-bye from Qingdao, China.